So today is Saturday, February 4th, 2023. Today I'd like to begin a small series that I've been working on of Teishos on Bodhisattvas and their connection with Zen practice. So this morning we'll begin with something certainly general, but topical, I think. In hard times, difficult times, bodhisattvas become very important beings that we can turn to for help, encouragement, support. So the question is, are bodhisattvas really real? That will be today's Teisho. Let's take a look. Zen Buddhism talks about the Bodhisattva with a capital B, as well as about bodhisattvas, uncapitalized. Who or what are they? In Sanskrit, bodhi is wisdom, and sattva, being. So a bodhisattva is literally someone who's a wisdom being. That is, someone wise enough to choose to grow up beyond their own unconscious, childish, habitual self-centeredness, to live a more selfless, compassionate life. In short, a bodhisattva is you and me, or can be, if we choose to work at freeing ourselves from the habitual compulsions of a self-centered life. We do this by counting the breath, this one, this two, this three, by experiencing this breath, absorbing ourselves in mu or other koan, until there's no room left for the habitual me, myself, and I to hog center stage or claim the driver's seat. Instead, there's just this breath, this koan, this vroom of a car passing in the street, this caw of the crow, this ache in the knee, unself-centered intimacy. This is the start of living a richer, wiser, because not caught up in ourselves, ignoring everything else, more compassionate life. When we recite great vows for all at the conclusion of formal rounds of Zazen, we are essentially taking bodhisattva vows, committing ourselves to the purpose of maturing for the sake of all. I think this is a little bit of lost territory in contemporary Western Zen, which is so demythologized, growing up in our culture, of course, and psychologized. We forget that we're part of a really grand tradition. And when we recite four vows, it's called in some places, great vows for all is how we do it out of my Diamond Sangha background. We're not just doing this as a final ritual before leaving the Zendo. We're really taking bodhisattva vows that this is how we're going to live when we step out of the Zendo. And in fact, it's why we've come to the Zendo. Our aim is to grow beyond self-oriented living and fulfill our potential as fully human beings. Rather than trying to become one with things, let's say, focusing on the practice, let's see, wait a minute. I see. Focusing on the practice, we let self-centeredness go and allow the world and its varied beings, trees, birds, dogs, mountains, to step in and realize themselves as the self. In other words, we don't move the self forward to become one with things. We focus on the practice and allow the self to fall into that, and everything steps in and is the self, our own self. Oneness is not a numerical one. The legendary birth of the Buddha presents this rather dramatically. At birth, if you remember, the baby Buddha is said to have proclaimed, "Above the heavens, below the heavens, I alone, the honored one." Now, this is not an article of fundamentalist belief, but it is the point of Zen in a nutshell, not simply calm, but intimacy, realization. Zen Buddhism, the Buddhist teaching, it's been said, has one taste, the taste of realization. And it has one purpose, to help us grow up. If it doesn't do that, do we really need yet another religion? And yet this dropping of self-centeredness, this growing up, is no more complex than being wowed by a sunset, or feeling warmth and joy as a smiling child runs towards us open-armed. Dualism, the core of self-centeredness, falls away, and I alone, the honored one. 1,500 years after the Buddha's birth, around 1000 AD, CE, whichever you want to call it, this fundamental insight returns again, repackaged as the soundless sound of a single hand. Case 18 of the Blue Cliff Record, the National Teacher's Seamless Monument, includes the following poem and Shwedo's comments on it. South of Sho and north of Tan, that is all over. Shwedo comments, the soundless sound of one hand. In between there is gold sufficient to a nation. Shwedo comments, a rough-hewn staff. Beneath the shadowless tree, a community ferry boat. Shwedo adds, clear is the river, calm is the sea. No holy one in the Emerald Palace, you see. Shwedo comments, all is finished. South of Sho and north of Tan, in between there is gold sufficient to a nation. Oh, this soundless sound, rather, of one hand. Oh, that's Shwedo's comment, right. The soundless sound of one hand. In between there is gold sufficient to a nation. Shwedo comments, a rough-hewn staff. Beneath the shadowless tree, a community ferry boat. Shwedo adds, clear is the river, calm is the sea. No holy one in the Emerald Palace, you say. Shwedo comments, all is finished. This is where Hakuin himself got the sound of a single hand when some several hundred years later, he turned it into one of our initial koans. Now, according to Mahayana Great Way Buddhist tradition, Maha is great, Yana is way or vehicle, there are countless spiritually maturing beings throughout the universe. Some have been at it a long time and are quite skilled by now, having put aside their own self-interest, including any interest in personally entering nirvana, until all beings are freed of suffering. They are totally dedicated to benefiting others. These are the great bodhisattvas. In Zen, we particularly revere a small cluster of them. Manjushri, bodhisattva of wisdom, who presides over traditional Zendos, and we'll talk more about Manjushri next week. And Kanon, or Avalokiteshvara, bodhisattva of compassion, who we'll talk about in weeks after that. And also Samantabhadra in Japan, he would be known as Fugen, bodhisattva of compassionate action, who, while currently less well known in the West, remains a mainstay of Asian Zen. Also, there's Kashitagarbha, in Japanese he would be Jizo, Earth Storehouse Bodhisattva, who is particularly dedicated to guarding travelers, children, and those suffering in the deepest hells. These are the Rembrandts and Picassos of our tradition. Compared to them, we are the Sunday hobbyists, just learning to set up our easels, mix our paints, and hold our brushes. But we're all of us on the way of the Bodhisattva. So Zen practice is not a matter of grabbing something ineffable called Kensho that solves all our problems, or becoming cool and unflappable and in the zone, or sitting quietly, calmly wearing wrist beads. Zen is simply a very direct way of walking the path of the Bodhisattva. In the Jataka tales, past life stories of the Buddha himself is the Bodhisattva, capitalized B. In these stories, we follow him through lifetimes as he returns again and again through the workings of cause and effect, or karma, and his own bodhisattva vows. in the form of various types of humans, as well as animals, trees, and non-human beings like gods, ogres, or naga serpents, evolving and maturing through life's challenges toward full Buddhahood. From this perspective, the way of the Bodhisattva is a legendary historical record of the Buddha's own personal path to his final life as the prince Siddhartha Gautama, who left home, sat beneath the Bodhi tree, and finally realized full and perfect enlightenment. Classical Buddhism says that the length of any bodhisattva's spiritual career, starting from his or her initial vow to attain the way for the benefit of all, to complete realization of original innate Buddhahood, is 3 times 10 to the 15 times 320 times 10 to the 6 years, or 4 times 960,000 million billion 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 years. In short, it takes an unimaginably, impossibly long time, a time beyond all understanding, which suggests, reading between the lines, that it is accessible right now beyond all concepts and all understanding. Dogen says that this period of a bodhisattva's maturing continues through countless kalpas of assiduous practice. A kalpa being the time it would take for a deva or god of a higher realm to swoop down to earth once every 100 earthly years and simply brush the top of a great mountain like Mount Everest with the sleeve of his or her silken robe, and by so doing, wear that mountain down to the ground. This is a profound and ancient image for the unimaginable depths of astronomic and geologic time. Torii Zenji Hakuin Zer emphasized that all genuine Zen students should be motivated by bodhisattva vows and understand that their training will entail what he called the long maturation. That is, maturing and deepening through long years of dedicated, ongoing, unflagging practice. According to Mahayana Buddhism, Buddha nature is intrinsic to every atom, bug, rock, tree, star, animal, and person. Master Hakuin makes this the opening point of his Zazen Wasan, song in praise of Zazen. From the beginning, all beings are Buddha. Yet, as Zen tradition also makes clear, and as Zen Master Dogen takes pains to point out, unless we do the work of practicing realization, original enlightenment remains unconscious, even as it underlies all we think, feel, sense, and do. The very beginning that Hakuin talks about is not distant in time or space. It is here with this thought, this breath, this count, this koan. This is the very beginning. Through the ongoing practice of realization, the realization of practice, we can, to one degree or another, wake to our birthright. Because original mind is our nature, we can practice realization of original mind. Jata tradition shows that animals can be bodhisattvas, perhaps more accurately that bodhisattvas can be animals, as can trees and plants. Is this a religious fantasy? Well, we know that dogs will run through flames to save humans, that dolphins will push drowning swimmers to shore and drive off sharks circling surfers, that orcas, so badly misnamed killer whales, have guided lost boaters to safe harbors, that older trees protect younger family members and younger trees help nourish and sustain their elders, guiding nutrients their way, and that it was trees working through the millennia that converted our barren rock of a planet into an oxygen-rich garden of life. None of this is fantasy. What does it say about the nature of our world? Maybe Mahayana Buddhism's insistence that bodhisattvic intent is real and not a fairy tale is real. Practicing Zazen and committing ourselves to an ethical life remains the core of our work as beginner bodhisattvas. The long process of growing up rests not on tearing down the self or denying it, but upon awakening to its essential wholeness and non-duality. Our 4 vows, or great vows for all, are vows of bodhisattvic aspiration that, long before deep ecology, clarify our determination to free all beings, not just ourselves and fellow humans, from suffering. At the core of such suffering, ours and everyone else's, is the delusive thought of me in here and everyone and everything else somewhere vaguely out there. Wars, class divisions, racism, misogyny, environmental destruction are the result of such dualistic thinking. In reality, says Dogen, all beings, ourselves included, not only have but are Buddha nature. Animals, trees, rivers, grasses, mountains, insects then join with us in great vows. We're all in this together. Without trees, no oxygen and no life on earth. Without insects, no pollination. Plant life withers and we all die. Without healthy rivers, we're up the creek, and so on. We save each other. The vow is mutual. To release all beings from the limitations we ourselves put on them is an immense challenge. Our first bodhisattva vow, the many beings are numberless, I vow to free them all, sets the stage. Our second vow, greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them all, shows us how to accomplish the first. It's the basic how-to of fulfilling the ideal vow to save all. As we free ourselves, we simultaneously free others and our planet from the damaging effects of our own previously wrong thinking. Thirdly, we vow to see the circumstances of our life, all the circumstances of our life, not only the nice ones, as Dharma gates, opportunities through which we can and will mature. Focusing on our practice, we free ourselves from dualistic delusion and regain intimacy. Each count, each breath, each koan is a potential Dharma gate. So, Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them all. Fourthly, we vow to embody the unattainable way of the Buddha and follow the selfless bodhisattvic path that leads to fulfillment. This way is unattainable because it already is us. You can't enter a room you never left or gain something you already have. Our fourth great vow then is, Buddha's way is unattainable. I vow to embody it all. Zen Buddhist tradition doesn't shy away from letting us know that to fulfill our aspiration will take perseverance and courage. Well, there will be milestones, peak experiences. We should not expect Zen practice, indeed any real spiritual practice, to be a stroll through the park on a sunny day. We are actualizing the hero and heroine's quest. Like others who've gone before us, we will have to cross barren deserts, climb frozen mountains, ford dangerous rivers, enter dark forests, cut through entangling thorns, fight dragons, and at times search through castles where everyone, even the flies on the walls, are asleep. Persevering is how our dedication, courage, and insight grow. In time, we come to see that the painful, self-centered sense of separation we all know is a kind of sickness, and that it can be cured. we begin to sense and to experience through our practice that original nature, the nature of all beings, is our own nature. Focusing on this breath, this count, this koan, not pushing anything away, but returning to our practice is the path of the Bodhisattva. Focusing on the breath or count or koan, there is no longer room in the mind for such habitual thoughts as I'm in here and everything and everyone else is out there. We don't have to break through anything or force anything, including our thoughts and emotions, away. Concepts of my body and my mind drop away, and a new, old, surprisingly familiar world is revealed. A first experience of realization is typically just a glimpse. This is kensho, as it's called in Japanese. A fuller, deeper seeing is satori, which these days often comes later, perhaps after years of sustained practice. Yet even a tiny glimpse is significant. It is the start of our bodhisattva path. Eiken Roshi said that Zen's great contribution to spiritual understanding is not enough yet, not yet enough, a divine discontent. But this is not to be confused with dissatisfaction. In time, self-conscious efforts give way to more relaxed and less self-willed practice. We guide, balance, and steer, but are no longer bent over the bars, red-faced, pedaling furiously uphill, making self-conscious efforts. Classical Buddhist texts say that there are 50 stages to a bodhisattva's evolution. Our job, regardless of numbers, is to simply begin anew with each round of zazen, with each breath. Our job is to practice and, like the Buddha touching the earth beneath the Bodhi tree, touch base with solid ground right where we are. Buddhist tradition also says that advanced bodhisattva mahasattvas, maha means great, and sattva beings, so these are really great beings, have been doing this for so long and are now so skilled they can appear in any form to bring help. Taking such forms in response to circumstances, their art form, their play. And a Japanese Buddhist monk traveling in Tang-era China reported that when he went to Mount Wutai, the mountain most sacred to Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, he found that monks, nuns, laymen, and women, pilgrims of any sort were all, without exception, kind to even the lowliest sorts of people or animals. They'd see a donkey and whisper, "That could be Manjushri. He might have taken this form." And they would treat that lowly creature with the utmost respect and reverence, just in case. In this way, whether they realized it or not, they brought Manjushri to life. For wisdom is compassion. Compassion, wisdom. Still, advanced bodhisattvas, Buddhist tradition says, might also surprise us with actions that look like anything but help. The storm that grounds our plane and drastically ruins our plans might be a bodhisattva doing his or her thing. Perhaps the delay saves us from who knows what. Or a bodhisattva could be the one dialing that ringing phone, which when we pick it up has no one on the line. Here's a true story. A young woman with a child on her hip stepped from the kitchen into the living room to answer the phone. "Hello," she said, but there was no one on the line. How irritating! Suddenly she heard a loud boom. The pressure cooker on the stove hadn't been properly closed, and with great pent-up force the lid exploded to the ceiling, spraying the room with boiling sauce. She and the child had been standing right next to that pot on the stove. They were saved from death, blindness, injury, by the wrong number phone call bodhisattva who dialed her up just in time. However, if you ever hear anyone saying, oh, doing to so-and-so, doing whatever to so-and-so was just me being a bodhisattva, please run. Immediately run away. Nor can we depend on miraculous salvations. It would be silly to go around proclaiming, that rude person who cut me off on the highway, making me miss my intended exit, was a bodhisattva. Or that bee sting that put me in the hospital was really a bodhisattva in disguise. Though faith in beings who are more spiritually developed than ourselves is certainly of deep value, and to be honest, is probably likely, it need not become an article of fixed belief or something to cling to. Roshi Rafe used to say that all we need to practice Zen is some faith that Shakyamuni wasn't a fool or a liar when upon his great enlightenment he exclaimed, wonder of wonders, all beings are Buddhas, fully endowed with wisdom and compassion. If we accept this, then at some point we will ask, what did he mean? How am I a Buddha? Where is my wisdom and compassion? This grit under our ego shell may bring forth a pearl. It is where practice realization, not simple mindfulness, as useful as that can be, begins. To know who or what bodhisattvas are, we need to know who or what we ourselves are. What is this self? Where is this self? Can we find it? Where's it located? Who sees colors with the eyes, hears sounds with the ears? We may point to our head or heart and say within. But where's that? And is that self within, male or female, old or young, wise or foolish? Not turning away, but looking directly into this, our freedom from anxiety, unease, and distress begins to open. Eventually, however, we will all face unanswerable questions. Why are there holocausts and killing fields? Why collapsing bridges, sinking ships, droughts, famines, and earthquakes that shatter innocent human and animal lives? Who am I? Why was I born? Why must I die? Why am I here? Who thinks thoughts? Who sees colors with the eyes? Who hears sounds with the ears? Who tastes with the tongue or feels with the body? Sometimes raising such questions can make us feel like children who've stumbled into a forbidden room. Still, we can't escape the pain of not knowing by slipping on rose-colored glasses. Clinging to even good beliefs distorts our ability to truly, clearly see. There is a Zen saying, even gold dust in the eyes can blind. Better than the gold of lofty belief is clear seeing itself, taking a step beyond all belief to what is, focusing on the count, the breath, the koan. Our compulsive need to recreate old narratives fades. Seeing what is, we're freed from what isn't. Rather than searching for bodhisattvas to save us, we'd do better to find out who bodhisattvas are, what and where they are, by knowing who and what we ourselves are. And so we come to the nub of it. Are there really bodhisattvas whose entire purpose and joy is to liberate others and do it as naturally as you and I might reach back for a pillow in the night? Let me tell you another true story. Back in 1970, Rose and I were living in backwoods Pennsylvania. We'd left Toronto, where I'd been a graduate teaching assistant, and we're living in a farmhouse an hour or so south of Binghamton, New York, where we'd been undergraduates. Rose was pregnant with our first child, our son, Jacob. One day we drove into Binghamton. Rose had a dentist appointment, and while she was busy, I took off in our old VW bus to handle errands. I chanced on a gas station where sat two old gents in overalls who sold used cars besides selling gas. As I gassed up, we talked. I mentioned the upcoming birth. They looked at me. Then they looked at the old VW, an unpadded, uninsulated, rattling, bare metal cargo plane of a van. You have a child coming, they mused. In their voices, I heard echoes of the 1950s cartoon rooster Foghorn Leghorn saying, "Son, I say, son." "Well, now," they said, "why don't you take a look at this GMC truck? Step right over here." It was blue, solid, gleaming, everything about it from the massive emergency brake to the rows of thickly padded removable bench-type seats proclaimed industrial strength. "Take a drive," they said. I got in and drove away. Such a smooth, solid ride. I had visions of plowing with ease up the hill to the old farmhouse through deep winter snows, a risky, bouncing pedal to the metal feet in our bus. I had visions of nomadic family security. "How much?" I asked, heart in my mouth, when I returned, flushed with truck power, with dreams and hope. They named a ridiculously low sum, plus our wretched old bus. We shook hands all around. It was a bargain. I picked up Rose, spilled the good news, and we headed happily home. I drove back the next day, check in my shirt pocket. About 5 blocks from their gas station car lot, there was a sudden loud bang. It came from the engine in the rear. The old VW staggered as if shot, then kept on rolling, though now in a halting, shuddering, groaning, wheezing sort of way. We limped up to the pump. I stopped and mercifully killed the engine, which gave out a final, long drawn-out, lamenting gasp before it died. Except for the ticking of overheated metal, there was only silence, an awful silence. I sat on the peeling leather seat waiting for the smoke to clear. From the haze of my mind rose a helpless, anguished refrain. Up the creek without a paddle, no truck, not even the old van now, cash low, baby coming. The two elderly gents had watched my stricken, labored approach. They rose from their chairs and stepped forward. "Well," they said, "you brought the van. Do you have the check?" Yes, I do. You'll still take it?" I asked, incredulous. "A deal's a deal," they answered. "You don't want more money?" I asked in a daze. "Nope," said the Bodhisattvas. Feverishly, I pulled the crumpled check from my pocket, signed it, and handed it over before they could change their minds. We finished up the paperwork and again shook hands all around. Then I drove off in that heavenly blue, the color of Bodhisattvas Guru Buddha, the Buddha of healing, Yakushi in Japanese, GMC truck, which not long after I drove serenely and safely and reliably down twisting mountain roads in a heavy fog in the middle of the night, so Jake could be born with one push in the local hospital of Susquehanna, PA. 8 weeks after that, we loaded all our possessions into our big blue truck and moved to Rochester. The truck was later named the Rafe Mobile by the Zen Center, which acquired it from us a year later. They got many further years of sturdy yeoman service from it. It ran and ran as if it possessed a good stout heart under its huge blue hood and not the mere mechanical assemblage of an engine. In fact, it ran as if blessed. Thinking back, I've sometimes wondered what I would have found if I'd gone back to that used car lot and gas station. An empty field, wind rippling through long grasses, no cars, flags, banners, pumps, no old gentlemen in overalls. Maybe all gone. Gone. entirely gone, as the Prajnaparamita Sutra says. Vast emptiness, yet like mind itself filled with endless compassionate potential. And those two old guys in overalls, they were bodhisattvas reaching out with helping hands. Maybe they were the rebirths of those old Zen loonies, Han Shan, Cold Mountain, and his buddy Shide, who came to be seen as emanations of the great bodhisattvas Manjushri and Samantabhadra. Emptiness and form are inseparable, after all. Even if, or though, countless powerfully helpful and compassionate bodhisattvas do surround us, our job is to practice, to embody our own bodhisattva vows and make them real. This is the path of all growing up wisdom beings. The ancient endless path begins with this breath, this count, this mu. Yet, as it is never far away, right here in this present fleeting moment is everything we seek. A monk asked Dalung, the body of form perishes. What is the eternal body? Dalung responded, the mountain flowers bloom like brocade. The river between the hills runs blue as indigo. The mountain flowers bloom like brocade. The river between the hills runs blue as indigo. That's case 82 of the Hekikanroku Blue Cliff record. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all, I think that will end a little bit early this morning.